Next, we're going to discuss the Faxination Hl7 connector. Hl7 is a communications protocol that was developed specifically for the healthcare industry and is used for internal data exchange between various healthcare systems. The Faxination Hl7 connector extends that data exchange to include both inbound and outbound fax and mobile messaging, but the typical application is to incorporate inbound faxes into a patient record or workflow. On the Messages tab of the Hl7 configurator, the first field is the local application name. This is the name by which other Hl7 applications will address the Faxination Hl7 connector. The local facility field is a secondary identifier, which is used when there is more than one instance of the Faxination Hl7 connector in the organization. The SMTP address template is a combination of the local application name, the local facility field, and a virtual domain name. And the address preview feature window displays the result of the SMTP address template. Note that an SMTP address for the Hl7 application is a requirement of the Hl7 standard, but the address is not used for SMTP communication by Faxination. The end result of the SMTP address template must be a properly formatted SMTP address, but an actual mailbox associated with that address is not a requirement for Faxination. The Channels tab is used to associate the Hl7 connector users in the Faxination Address Manager with specific inbound-outbound channel configurations via a system address. Two channels may be configured in evaluation mode and in the baseline license configuration. A channel configured for both inbound and outbound is still counted as one channel for Faxination licensing purposes. Additional channels may be licensed as needed. The notification options are typical for all outbound-capable Faxination hosts. The notify address is the SMTP or X500 address which will receive the notifications. When a notification field is mapped from the Hl7 data within a configured template, it will have priority over the notify address field configured here. You must also define the appropriate address type, SMTP or EX, and the mail system, Faxination SMTP stack or Faxination MS Exchange connector, that will deliver the notification message. When the Use Custom Trusted Certificates option is enabled in the configuration of one or more channels, the custom certificates must be defined on this tab. The certificates must be installed locally on the same server that is running the Hl7 connector, and they are defined by their key ID or file name. If the certificate requires authentication, a password may also be specified. Hl7 Workflow Inbound. An inbound fax is received by the transport layer and passed to the Faxination kernel along with routing and transmission information. The Faxination kernel matches the routing information to an Hl7 user entity, converts the fax to PDF, and passes the message to the Hl7 connector for delivery. A retry mechanism exists to deal with temporary network interruptions. The Hl7 connector matches an MLP channel to the Faxination user's system address. It constructs the message using the Hl7 template, and then passes the message to the Hl7 application. The success or failure of the inbound message delivery is then logged by the Faxination kernel. Hl7 Workflow Outbound. The Faxination Hl7 connector receives a message from an Hl7 application. The recipient address, sender, cover sheet, and other Faxination message fields are parsed from the Hl7 data using the associated template. The message and the parsed information are passed to the Faxination kernel, which then processes the outbound fax the same as it would for any outbound Faxination host, including notifications, logging, and archiving. The Faxination REST connector provides a programmatic interface for inbound and outbound fax and mobile messaging, similar to the Faxination Web Service connector. Compared to .NET Web Services, REST is more lightweight and easily scriptable, with a simplified IDE and no API or DLL requirements. However, unlike the Faxination Web Service connector, it supports pull messaging only. That means the REST connector only listens for requests coming from your REST applications. It cannot initiate connections to deliver inbound messages and notifications. Within the REST connector configurator, on the IP filtering tab, we can limit the IP addresses that are permitted to make a connection to this REST interface. The IP addresses are not restricted by default. On the Binding tab, you can set the listen address where the REST connector will listen for new connections, and specify a client certificate to use for communication when required. On the Authorization tab, you can limit the connections to only authorized accounts via a username and password that are managed here and stored on the local server. You can add, edit, and remove authorized accounts. And you can enforce a minimum password length when creating or editing authorized accounts. The REST connector includes its own web server. On the Web Hosting tab, when enabled, you can also use it to host files. Provide a path to a virtual directory, just like choosing a virtual directory in IIS. And you can enable default documents to serve when one is not specified in the request URL. This feature seems odd at first, but it can be used to provide your developers with Faxination information that is specific to the REST connector, such as an online methods reference. Just as with the Faxination Web Service connector, the Faxination REST connector does nothing on its own. The customer must develop an application with a REST interface. The Web Sharing tab allows you to enable and define the domains that are permitted to participate in cross-origin resource sharing. This feature allows scripts originating from foreign or unknown domains to perform REST calls to this connector. Cross-origin resource sharing is disabled by default. The Systems tab allows you to associate Faxination system addresses with inbound and outbound messaging options by message type, message direction, and notification configuration. The default listen port for the Faxination REST connector is 18385. Unlike web services via IIS, the REST connector does not include a WSDL. We have created something similar to a WSDL using an RSS feed. Note that your browser must support RSS feeds. As of this writing, the latest versions of Chrome, Opera, and Microsoft Edge no longer support RSS. The latest versions of Internet Explorer, Firefox, and Safari do support RSS. In any case, the data in the RSS feeds that accompany the initial release of the REST connector are reproduced in the Faxination 2016 Host Connectors Guide.